involved in theater, how you came to write plays.
Right. I got involved in high school. I was a graphic artist and very shy, couldn't speak, just wasn't able to articulate things very well. And my teacher said, you gotta get into some kind of speech class, and she threw me in a drama class. She said, you gotta be able to explain to people what you're designing. So when I got into the theater class, she gave me Course Raisin in the Sun. And we got together, we did a scene from it, and it just changed my life. It made me feel like I was a different person, but the same person. I was able to be the angry young black man without being apologetic. It was someone else's voice allowing the voice inside of me to come out. So I thank Ms. Hansberry for her beautiful work and changing my life.
What was the step like from performing to actually writing plays?
I loved performance. When I was in college, most of the years I performed in college and after college. But while I was in college, I also was dyslexic, so I had a hard time placing my composition together. And the teacher said to me, she said, well, you're a wonderful performer. I've seen you on stage. Why don't you put together this composition as you're writing a play? And that felt natural for me. It felt like, oh yeah, in plays I can listen to dialogue and I can make mistakes. And because I'm trying to really preserve that language. So I just loved it. It was a way for me to able to sit down and create a whole world and express something and develop another voice. So moving from performance to writing, I just felt it was in the same kind of genre of expressing yourself.
Now, you've done a lot of different things in the theater.
And not just the theater.
For tonight, this is...
We don't have that much time, right?
Right. And you've done them in a lot of different places, but let's start with where you are now,
Yeah.
which is artistic director of the Angelina Community Theater in Lufkin, Texas.
Right.
Tell us about the Angelina Community Theater, how long you've been there, how it's developed.
Angelina Community Theater, Angelina County had been without a community theater for nearly 13, 12 years, I'd say. And we felt the absence of it. The community felt the absence. The school programs were lacking. We wanted to continue to reach out into the community. And we thought we have to, some of the alumni of the Angelina College got together and we said we have to create, a community theater here again. So we've been going for about 4 years strong. We've produced several plays, and we have our summer theater program for kids. We're able to reach out into the community, develop scholarships for the kids to come to the camps. We've done everything from honk to our last show was something in a giant peach. What show is that?
James and the Giant
James and the Giant Peach. And these kids are amazing. 2 weeks of working, 1 week of rehearsal. They get on stage, they perform the entire script without, off-book, music and everything. So we bring the teachers in and we inspire them by just seeing the students and letting them know this is possible. You can actually teach and get a child to be focused and learn, and not just the theater, but try to use these programs in your other programs like math and English. Yeah. So we've been very successful so far.
Yeah, I think you have to do around
Because in rural areas or wherever you are, you learn to, if you want to survive, you learn to partner with people. the VFW hall in Angelina County. They heard that we needed space, and the next time they invited us over, they had started building a stage. So we were able to partner with them and have a space, have a permanent space.
Now, you're also involved in the Vanport Mosaic Festival in a very different part of the country, Portland, Oregon. What is the Vanport Mosaic Festival, and what's your role in it?
The Vanport Mosaic Festival is a festival that was born out of the need to capture these living memories before the 1948 flood happened in Portland and wiped out a community, an African American community, almost 100,000 people. And out of that event came the event of really exposing Oregon and Portland's policies of discrimination and racism. They began to redline the cities, only allowing African Americans to live in certain areas. It wasn't just African Americans targeted, you know, it was people that were different. They didn't want Italians, Irish, they didn't want anyone coming to Portland that wasn't white Portland. So the Vanport Mosaic go out and interview the survivors from Vanport. Actually, we also write about displacement, we produce plays about displacement. I see one young man out there who's a playwright, Michael Jones, was part of the Vanport Mosaic Festival. Was a play about displacement that was a part of the festival. So, and they're ongoing, continuing organization, and not just dedicated to the Vanport story anymore. They have information that goes now into public schools, telling the history of that community. So it's amazing that many people in Portland now, they stop and they say, well, when did that happen? Well, I don't remember anything about a flood happening here. And so it's so important to be able to preserve and tell our stories.
Yes. Now, by interesting coincidence, although I don't really think it's coincidence, a previous winner of the Ottawa Awards in 2012 was a play about Vanport. And it was about a family that migrated from Birmingham during World War II to work in the shipyards there.
Exactly.
And what happened to them. And that was called Cottonwood of the Flood by Rich Rubin. And then I discovered today that it was produced at the Vanport Mosaic Festival in 2016.
Yeah.
It's,
yeah. So, Rich, I met Rich, and one of Rich's, he's such a wonderful, beautiful writer, and the play really depicts the Vanport situation and story, and gives a wonderful story of a family moving south on the Great Migration out to Portland. And I didn't really direct that play. Woody, did you direct that play? Yeah. As a reading?
Yeah.
Yeah, so many connections.
so we're all connected. That years at the Billy Rose Theater Collection at the New York Public Library at Lincoln Center. You know, and for those of you who don't know, it's one of the greatest collections of theater memorabilia, photos, paintings, programs in the world. Tell us what you did there and how that impacted on you as an artist.
It was a wonderful experience. I mean, I came to New York that summer, and I had just finished a play, and I had called the theater to tell them where to send my check to, and they said, there's no checks, the theater's gone bankrupt. So, like, okay, well, I'm in New York, and so let me just look around. And I went to the public library and applied for a job, and they sent me up to the Billy Rose Theater Collection for an interview, and I was hired. I was hired as first as a librarian, and we worked in the archives preserving material. One of my friends there, I see Keith Perry.
Going in.
And Dr. Rod Bladell worked there, and we were neighbors and everything. Still? Wow. Wow. So it was a great experience, and I was hired, and one of my projects that I later was able to do was become the archivist for the Off-Broadway collection. And I was able to go out into the community and collect materials from different theater companies to preserve those clippings, photographs, reviews. It's still, the collection is still there. One of the other collections that we were starting at the time was the Lucille Lortel collection. There used to be like 3 monitors. I think there's over 20 now. So it was an exciting part of my life as a young artist. I met Helen Hayes before she passed, and Judith Jamerson, and it was amazing. I was about 23 years old, and it certainly made me feel that not only the work that I was doing, but all of the work that people were doing in the arts was valuable, because we would collect some from Broadway to some guy in the subway singing if it got reviewed, you know? So it made me feel that art, no matter where it was, it has a value. So it affected my life in that way greatly.
Talking about valuable art, tell us about Summer Squash. What's the genesis of that play? How did it come to be?
Well, I began to write a collection of plays on my family's folklore. And that play came out of my family's folklore, American Summer Squash. My ancestors were the Creek Indians from Florida that migrated into Texas. The chief of that tribe refused to take the orders of the government to go to Oklahoma, Indian territory, but he decided to come into Texas, where his uncle was, Uncle Red Shoes. And from that point, the government totally tore up the treaties and said that, because Texas wasn't a state then, said that we went out of the United States, so the treaty was null and void, right? So anyway, I wanted to take that journey that the Chief Blunt took from New Orleans down to Trinity into Texas. And my idea was to take that journey with one of his great-great-great-grandsons, and that would have been Ratcliffe.
Right. A particular incident during the hurricane, you told me about how you woke up one morning and what it changed.
The storm was 500 miles long, so it went all the way up to Oklahoma. So East Texas is just 300 miles from the city of New Orleans. And the little town I'm in is about 5,000 people. And so the next day, after the evacuations, we woke up and there was like 200,000 people in this little town. And that was this family that you saw here on stage. We weren't prepared, of course. The city, the resources, we weren't prepared. Nobody was prepared. From Florida to Texas, no one was prepared for this storm. And it was just devastating. It felt so surreal. It felt like you were in a Beckett play or something. We would walk out and you would see hundreds of miles down the road, cars, people sleeping in cars full of people, and people dying in cars, just overheated and everything. I went to the shelter to help to see what I could do, and I just felt overwhelmed. And I felt overwhelmed because I just felt, talking to the people, their problem wasn't the storm. Their problem wasn't Hurricane Katrina. Their problem was about not being treated in a humane way for many years. And I didn't know what to do for that, but it certainly got into my DNA, and I'm glad it arrived on paper.
So are we. I mean, I think that's what the strength of the play is that it's a juncture of history and a particular moment, a particular family, and that embodies that history. But enough of my opinions. Let's take, we have about 10 minutes. I'd like to hear something from you all. You just say what about the play you found moving, or inspiring, or interesting, or stimulating, and share it with each other and with our players.
Well, I love it. I love the writing. The cast is phenomenal. You guys were awesome. So it's interesting that the Reverend is the relative and the source for the story. I was thinking it was Lucille, and I was going to ask you about that, whether it was built on real people, because she felt very real. And the language and the research that it took to bring her to life. So can you expound on that a little bit about the Indians and the movement from that part of Texas?
Let's talk about the language.
Yeah.
When I wrote it, I thought, wow, it would be really great to be able to preserve some of the Creek language. And so I went out to the reservation, to the Alabama and the Catawbas. They speak Hitchiti as similar to the Muskogee language as the Creeks, my particular tribe did. So it took 3 years to get the tribal council to approve the language that was in the play. So I was so very grateful that for that to happen, but it also made me feel how precious these pieces of jewels were, in preserving this language that, we no longer, my people at least, were no longer able to speak. My grandmother lived to be 110, and she later, in her later life, like in her 90s, in her like 100, 106, she would say Creek words, and she would speak in Creek, and we would be like, but we didn't record it. But Lucille is based on a folklore within my family. A lady called Fatty. We called her Miss Fatty, but her Creek name was Tallahassee. She did marry Jonas at the age of 13 because her person who took her in asked her to take care of her husband after she died. And a 13-year-old child married, and he was about 60 years old. And she married and had 3 children of her own.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you for that. This is incredible. I'm a Georgia country boy, and my family is in New York because my grandmother came up with the Great Migration to get away from Jim Crow. But there's you capture a language and a style of an aggressive and almost feral love, where it's when we have a stunted style of expression, that we don't really know the proper way to be soft with one another, because the world has never been soft with us. And to hear the language spoken up there reminded me greatly of my family. I just want to tell you that I appreciate it. That's
what it's about. It's about a great fan of August Wilson. When I was here in New York, worked with the dramatists for a long time and helped preserving their libraries. And I would every now and then get little glimpses of Wilson. He would always give us tickets to go to his shows. And that's what it was about. It was listening to his talk about preserving our language, like Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes, in preserving that.
Yeah. Oh, yes, okay.
Hello, Donald and Glenn. Welcome back to New York. I find that the casting was excellent. The cast brought this whole thing together. And you, as a writer, I've done a few of your plays. I'm familiar with your work. But can you tie in the American King Pumps? Because I know that's related to your family tree as well. Explain that to us.
Right. Once again, the American plays I was writing had to deal with the folklore of my family, and would probably have been Radcliffe's great-grandfather. And in the American menu, she would have been Mary, who was half Indian. This would be her part of her story. And one of the reasons that I liked or was thinking of the titles of American plays, because at one point I always thought these are my family stories. We are We are Americans. This is what my America is, and this is what every America is. And I always dislike the feel of the language of hearing someone say the African American experience, or slavery was the African American experience, or the Trail of Tears was the Native American experience. Katrina was the African American experience. We didn't invent slavery. We didn't create legislation to continue slavery for hundreds of years. So that's not my story. I didn't pick it to create, legislation to keep me enslaved. I didn't pick it, my people didn't pick it to create the Trail of Tears, to be disenfranchised, to lose our identification. That's not the American experience. What's happened when it comes to us, or my family, or me, or when I see people of color sometimes, I feel we are surviving the American experience.
All right, yes, gentleman in the front row.
I'm Antonio, and one of the things that struck me was, as a gentleman in the back had said, about the language. I found that even when people were screaming at each other, fighting and cussing, the respect was still just under the surface for each other. It was not lost. And is the cast New York based or not?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they're all the New York actors.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes.
Okay, hi. You dropped your glasses next to your friend. I don't want you to step on them and not be able to see who we are later. Mr. Glenn, I'm from Texas too. And my grandmother lived to be 107 from Oklahoma. Women, Choctaw. Anybody know about Choctaw? Talk to me. Okay, talk to me. So Creek and Choctaw and that whole, and you mentioned the thing in here about the dolls, but you brought up a whole bunch of gems and jewels in her that everybody don't know what you dropped on them. Kind of like that summer squash at the end of the play. Now, Miss Lucille would have been upset because that would have bruised her fruit, but that's not subject. I did love how you captured all of the characters, but I especially liked how you captured the women. My grandmother, Lucille, and they were all property owners. They did everything they could to hold on to their property. So, which is what the people in New Orleans were trying to do, but the storm was, and using your words, so overwhelming that it's like after everything settled, now what do? The people kept coming, They kept trying to get further and further away, and some people went back to claim their land, but a vast majority of them did not. So I kind of liked how completion is a real funny thing, that yin-yang, that male yin-yang thing that we had with the guys in the beginning, and there was something about it that I'm like going, okay, all right, okay, this father-son thing, and then the women came in, and then the yin-yang changed, and the dynamic of what it was you were trying to say started becoming more complete. Like filling in the land, and when those areas started becoming states, and all the things that people wanted to try to do, they couldn't do anymore. And here is Sweet 16. Sweet 16 said, look at him. I'm gonna go for my man. And that's the yin-yang of it. The completion of what, and that's the whole thing about what helped to complete it. So I really, really appreciated what you drew, and the board and the way you painted it, because, and I hope this gets a production somewhere, not just in Texas, not just in
Although there's nothing wrong with Texas.
You know what I mean.
We all know what you mean. All right, thank you. That's a good way to end. We have to bring it to a close now. Thank you all for coming, and thank you.
Have you Orleans is the hottest city you've ever seen. Gotta love them red beans, you gotta love them mustard green. In this city called New Orleans. If you're not from New Orleans, let me hear you scream. Hope you're feeling much better now, like my homies feel. When you're feeling down and out, and you feel there's no way out, you get dropped off in New Orleans.